Van Cleef, born Clarence Leroy Van Cleef, Jr., on January 9, 1925, in Somerville, New Jersey, was a man who would grow to become one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood, especially known for his work in westerns and crime films. He came from humble beginnings, growing up in a family that valued hard work, discipline, and resilience, lessons he carried throughout his life. Van Cleef's early years were shaped not only by modest living, but also by a sense of responsibility, which later translated into the commanding presence he held on screen. During World War II, he served in the United States Navy, an experience that instilled in him a toughness and self-discipline that would define his persona both in real life and in the roles he played. After the war, like many veterans, he found himself at a crossroads, searching for a career that could give him purpose and allow him to express himself. By chance, he turned toward acting, a choice that would transform his life. Unlike traditional Hollywood leading men, Van Cleef's appearance was strikingly unique. His sharp, angular face, high cheekbones, and piercing eyes set him apart from the soft-featured actors of the 1950s. Instead of being a disadvantage, these qualities became his signature, allowing him to play roles full of menace, mystery, and quiet authority. In his early career, he was often cast as villains or tough supporting characters, roles that allowed him to demonstrate his talent for subtle, intense performances that left lasting impressions even when his screen time was short. One of his earliest and most memorable roles was in High Noon in 1952, where he played a ruthless outlaw opposing Gary Cooper's marshal. Though his scenes were brief, his presence was electrifying, silent, yet intimidating, setting the tone for the rest of his career. Following this, he appeared in dozens of films, including classics such as Shane in 1953 and The Big Combo in 1955. In each, he brought a mix of cold calculation and understated menace, portraying men on the fringes of society, gunmen, enforcers, and criminals whose actions often spoke louder than words. However, his career faced a setback in the late 1950s when a serious car accident left him with a permanently damaged knee. This injury limited his mobility, making it difficult to take on physically demanding roles, and for a time, it seemed as if Hollywood might overlook him. Yet, Van Cleef's resilience and patience carried him through this period, and he continued to take smaller roles, including television appearances and low-budget films, waiting for the opportunity that would redefine his legacy. That opportunity arrived in the mid-1960s, when Italian director Sergio Leone recognized his talent and cast him in the spaghetti western For a Few Dollars More in 1965 as Colonel Douglas Mortimer. Unlike his earlier roles as a villain, Mortimer was a complex character, combining intelligence, emotional depth, and lethal skill. This performance transformed Van Cleef from a familiar face into an international star. He followed it with an iconic role as Angel Eyes in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in 1966, a performance that showcased his ability to embody pure, calculating evil. Angel Eyes was chilling not because of loud threats or dramatic outbursts, but because of his calm, methodical, and utterly remorseless nature. With just a glance, a deliberate pause, or a slow gesture, Van Cleef communicated more menace than many actors could achieve in full speeches. His performances in these films cemented his status as one of cinema's most memorable antagonists. Over the years, he continued to headline European westerns such as Day of Anger in 1967, The Big Gun Down in 1966, and Death Rides a Horse in 1967. These roles allowed him to explore more nuanced characters, men driven by honor, revenge, or personal codes, showing that he could be more than a villain. He could be a leading man with depth, wisdom, and moral complexity. Beyond the screen, Lee Van Cleef was deeply affected by the lives and deaths of people around him, especially those he worked closely with in Hollywood. The first celebrity death that profoundly impacted him was the passing of his High Noon co-star, Gary Cooper. Cooper was known for his integrity and calm authority, and losing someone who symbolized such professionalism and decency left Van Cleef reflecting on the fleeting nature of life and the fragility of success in Hollywood. Another loss that hit him deeply was John Wayne, a figure who represented the rugged masculinity of the American West. Van Cleef respected Wayne not just as a colleague, but as a symbol of the genre that shaped his career. The third death that affected him was Clint Eastwood's frequent collaborator and mentor, Sergio Leone, whose direction had brought him international fame. Losing a director who understood and challenged him creatively was a personal and professional blow, reminding him how much of his career had been intertwined with Leone's vision. The fourth was James Coburn, an actor known for his quiet charisma and understated performances, much like Van Cleef himself. Their friendship extended beyond the set, and Coburn's death reminded Van Cleef of the impermanence of close bonds in the film industry. Fifth, he mourned the death of Patrick McGoohan, his co-star in The Hard Way and other projects, who had inspired him with a dedication to craft and versatility. Finally, Lee Van Cleef was deeply affected by the loss of his longtime friend and collaborator, Henry Silva, whose work ethic and shared experiences on film sets left a lasting impression. These 6 deaths shaped not only his reflections on life, but also his approach to acting and his understanding of human connection, grief, and resilience. Despite these personal losses, Van Cleef continued to work with discipline and professionalism. He appeared in action films like The Octagon in 1980 opposite Chuck Norris, and in cult classics such as John Carpenter's Escape from New York in 1981, proving that even as Hollywood changed, his talent and presence remained formidable. Even in the later years of his career, he embraced television with The Master in 1984, portraying a ninja master whose wisdom and authority reflected the gravitas he had cultivated over decades. Through all these experiences, both joyful and sorrowful, Van Cleef demonstrated a remarkable ability to persist, adapt, and excel in his craft. Beyond his professional achievements, his personal life reflected similar qualities. He was a devoted family man, marrying Patty Ruth Cale in 1943 and raising 3 children. While the marriage ended in 1958, it represented a period of deep personal investment, responsibility, and resilience. His experiences of loss, whether through divorce, accidents, or the passing of colleagues, shaped the man behind the steely gaze, reinforcing both his toughness and his reflective nature. Ultimately, Lee Van Cleef's life was a combination of talent, resilience, discipline, and emotional depth, all of which contributed to his extraordinary legacy on screen and off. After establishing himself in Hollywood and Italy, Lee Van Cleef became a cornerstone of European westerns, demonstrating his range by portraying characters motivated by complex codes of honor, revenge, or justice. Films like Day of Anger, Death Rides a Horse, and The Big Gun Down allowed him to expand his acting repertoire beyond villains and into morally ambiguous anti-heroes who commanded respect, fear, and admiration in equal measure. His performances were subtle yet powerful, often relying on expressive eyes, measured gestures, and precise timing, rather than overt dramatic flourishes. The legacy of these roles was reinforced by his deep understanding of human nature, shaped both by his early life experiences and by the grief he encountered through the deaths of colleagues and friends. The passing of Gary Cooper, John Wayne, Sergio Leone, James Coburn, Patrick McGoohan, and Henry Silva profoundly influenced his approach to acting, reinforcing the awareness that life was fleeting and that meaningful connections were precious. Van Cleef often reflected privately on these losses, integrating his emotions into his craft to create performances that resonated deeply with audiences. Cooper's death, for example, reminded him of the quiet strength of integrity and professionalism, qualities he sought to emulate in his own career. John Wayne's passing was a reflection on the changing nature of Hollywood itself and the fleeting prominence of genre stars. The death of Leone was particularly poignant, as their collaboration had defined some of the most critical points of Van Cleef's career. Losing a director who understood his abilities and challenged him creatively felt like losing a part of his artistic identity, inspiring him to honor that legacy through careful role selection and disciplined performance. The deaths of fellow actors like Coburn, Guhin, and Silva further reinforced Van Cleef's understanding of human impermanence and the value of camaraderie in a competitive industry. These experiences translated into his later work, where he often portrayed characters imbued with a mixture of wisdom, sorrow, and understated menace. In the 1980s, Van Cleef continued to adapt to the changing Hollywood landscape. Films such as The Hard Way in 1980 allowed him to display enduring authority and skill, while action hits like The Octagon with Chuck Norris introduced him to a new generation of viewers. His role in John Carpenter's Escape from New York in 1981 further solidified his reputation as a reliable, commanding presence who could elevate any project. Even with the industry shifting towards younger, faster-paced action heroes, Van Cleef maintained his signature blend of calm menace and disciplined gravitas, ensuring his work remained compelling and memorable. His television ventures, including The Master in 1984, allowed him to explore new genres, such as martial arts and mentorship roles, which drew directly from his personal experiences of discipline, resilience, and mentorship in life. Though the series was short-lived, it demonstrated his ability to remain relevant and innovative, even decades into his career. Personal tragedies and the deaths of close colleagues continued to shape his outlook, reinforcing his focus on quality over quantity when choosing roles. His approach remained methodical, disciplined, and deeply introspective, reflecting both the impact of loss and the wisdom he had gained from a long and varied career. Van Cleef's personal life was marked by a similar combination of resilience and quiet reflection. His early marriage, though it ended, reflected his dedication to family and the balance he sought between personal responsibility and professional ambition. The care he took in raising his children, navigating the challenges of Hollywood, and coping with grief demonstrated an emotional depth that often contrasted with his cold, intimidating, on-screen persona. The losses he experienced, including the 6 celebrity deaths that affected him most, were never spoken of loudly or theatrically. Instead, they informed his work in subtle ways, creating performances that resonated with audiences precisely because they were authentic, grounded, and emotionally nuanced. Each loss taught him the value of presence, the importance of timing, and the need for restraint, qualities that became hallmarks of his acting style. Van Cleef's enduring success across multiple decades was a testament not only to his talent, but also to his character. He understood the importance of hard work, resilience, and emotional authenticity, lessons that were reinforced both by his early life experiences and the losses he faced in adulthood. His legacy as an actor was not simply the number of roles he played, but the quality, depth, and subtlety of those performances. Films ranging from westerns to action thrillers to cult classics demonstrated his versatility, while the respect he earned from colleagues, directors, and audiences reflected his integrity and professionalism. Off-screen, Van Cleef remained a man who valued friendship, loyalty, and discipline, principles that guided both his career and personal life. The deaths of colleagues and mentors reminded him of the preciousness of relationships and the brevity of life, shaping the way he approached both work and personal interactions. In all, Van Cleef's life can be seen as a series of challenges met with resilience, a career defined by subtle power and presence, and a personal journey informed by loss, reflection, and growth. He transformed adversity into art, channeling the lessons of grief and perseverance into performances that continue to inspire audiences decades after they were filmed. Whether portraying cold-hearted villains, morally complex anti-heroes, or wise mentors, Lee Van Cleef brought authenticity, precision, and gravitas to every role, leaving a legacy that is unparalleled in film history. As Lee Van Cleef's career progressed, he continued to embrace new opportunities while honoring the lessons of his past, including the profound impact of the deaths of Gary Cooper, John Wayne, Sergio Leone, James Coburn, Patrick McGoohan, and Henry Silva. These experiences shaped not only his approach to acting, but also his understanding of life, mortality, and relationships. His performances became more nuanced, reflecting the complexity of human emotion and the subtle interplay between strength, fear, and vulnerability. In later films, he portrayed characters who were both formidable and reflective, individuals whose authority was tempered by wisdom, experience, and sometimes sorrow. Van Cleef understood that audiences responded not just to appearances or bravado,